Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. While we were away, Harry Reid took to the microphone outside the White House. He left his meeting with the other Democratic senators. We have Susan Ferrechio, Chief Congressional Correspondent for the Washington Examiner, on the line. And Susan, here's in a nutshell. Harry Reid said, we have to see what the Republicans are going to send over. We don't know what they don't know what they want. We haven't seen anything in writing. There's a question as to how much they'll raise the debt ceiling for 6 weeks, or if it's even 6 weeks. We have to see. But then the last question was, all along, Senator, you've maintained that you will not negotiate anything unless the government is reopened and the debt ceiling is allowed to rise without any preconditions. Would you agree to raise the debt ceiling, but keep the government shut? And he said, not going to happen, and walked away. So I don't even know what he's talking about. But if he's true with not going to happen, then we're right back to square one.
Yeah, that's the best point of all in all this, Steve, is the monkey wrench that is the government shutdown. I mean, they can all say, okay, this debt ceiling thing really hurts the financial markets. It's far more threatening in many ways than a government shutdown, which is really only a partial shutdown. So let's take care of that, and then we'll negotiate all the other things like a long-term deal on debt raising and a borrowing limit, and also what to do about the government shutdown. Well, not so fast, say the Democrats, who have been wanting to find a way to reopen the government and blame it on Republicans, and they've been wanting to do that all along. So what good would it do them to agree to this deal at this point if the government shutdown is not part of the bargain? So in other words, it may be hard to get – here's what I think is going to happen. I do think the House can pass the plan you just described. Short-term increase in the borrowing limit, that's clean. I think it can pass if the president agrees to talk about major spending reform. Second issue is what will happen after it leaves the House? We'll go to the Senate. Well, there are some Republicans. The crack in the door there are some Republicans who want to attach to this House bill, a bill, something to reopen the government. There's enough Republicans who may go along with that you could pass a bill in the Senate that changes the House bill to reopen the government. If that happens, of course, things get complicated because then the House bill and the Senate bill don't agree. They have to be the same bill to become law. And so now we've got a little bit of a complicating factor. What will the House do? I think what could happen at that point is, at least, in my imagination, the Speaker could put that bill on the floor, and if the deal is good enough on debt ceiling in terms of major spending reform, and maybe they get a little piece of the health care law changed, like medical device tax, or making sure that the government workers in the Congress and congressmen are not getting special subsidies, he may put that on the floor.
But wait, let me stop you. Where would those concessions come from? The Senate? I mean, the Senate would send that bill back, or would it come in conference, or where would those concessions be made?
Right. The Senate could amend the House bill.
Right.
To open the government.
Right, and include those concessions in it.
Yes, they would have to include something in it, because otherwise, what's the point of passing now when they know? Right. It would put too much. What would Boehner do? Then he'd be back in the same position with the government, and it would be up to Boehner to decide what's he going to do. Now, don't forget, this thing changes. The members are. This shutdown is now in its second week. The members don't feel the same way they did on the night that this thing started, the shutdown started, when they were all gung-ho. Now the polls are blaming them more and more. Now the market is fading over fear of debt ceiling and also government shutdown has duration. So these things have an impact on whether members are really going to get upset with the Speaker. But he still has to worry about that far-right flank. So he needs to put something in it for them, and he would need to talk them into it. But that's the deal I envision. You're not going to get – Eric Cantor just told me today that he's going to talk to the president about delaying the individual mandate. That would be probably the biggest thing they could get, and it would be hard to imagine that kind of concession, except for the fact that the health care law implementation has –
It's a disaster, right?
It's a disaster, right. Maybe the president says, great idea. That I can blame them, and then give us time to see what the problem is here. Maybe he does that, but there's huge pitfalls for delaying it, because you delay it, it puts the whole thing in jeopardy too. So I think that those are the possibilities that are floating out there right now. And again, the president could sit down with the Republicans and be less, negotiable, less malleable than they hope. He could say, I'm not going to really agree to alter Medicare here. I'm not going to really agree to make the kind of changes that will cut important programs. He may say that, and then Republicans may walk out and say, hey, we brought him a deal, and now he's keeping the government shut.
Right. Well, and we're talking to Susan Ferrechio, Chief Congressional Correspondent, Washington Examiner, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Yeah, but when I heard, Reid just walk away and not say, it would have been smarter, not only in the spirit of bipartisanship, not that that exists, but in the spirit of not trying to, wreck the market rally that we saw today, and we are seeing it's still up 294, the Dow. But to say not going to happen, in other words, he basically said unless we get a clean CR, unless they agree without condition to raise the debt ceiling, there's nothing going to happen. I don't think he meant that, but that's what he said. But let me ask you a question. Who's going to the White House? I just had Congressman Tim Yuleskamp from Kansas, who, by the way, is not happy about offering an extension of the debt ceiling. He wants everything done now. But having said that, I said, are you going? He said, no, I'm not going. I said, well, I heard reports that the whole caucus was going, and then that the leadership wasn't going because it wasn't going to be a negotiation. It was going to be a talking to by the president. Then I heard the leadership was going. He said, well, it's a good question, Steve. I don't know who's going, but I wasn't called to go. So who's going?
Well, the entire conference was invited. That's 232 members.
Well, nobody invited Tim Yuleskamp.
No. So the leadership reduced the list. They culled it down and get rid of everybody except the elected leadership and some of the chairmen.
Oh, okay.
About 19 people total. They really didn't. They wanted people in the room who were going to be able to negotiate, and they felt like, they wanted to leave out Yuleskamp and company because that's not the deal they're going to have. They want to reopen. That's a different faction. And while Boehner is going along with them right now with this government shutdown, Boehner is not going to let the debt ceiling come and go. I think he's far more nervous about that. I mean, like you say, the markets are rallying today, but they hadn't been. And again, back to what you're saying about Reid and the short-term deal. There's another reason Reid hates this whole thing. He introduced his own debt ceiling deal that went to December 2014. Well, guess why? He doesn't want this interfering with the 2014 election.
Right.
That's his majority. That's his post as majority leader right there. They could lose the majority. It's a tough election coming up for them. If they're fighting debt ceiling in the middle of all that, what a disaster. So he wants this thing pushed off till December after the November election, and then we'll deal with it. That's his view. So if the president is proposing, okay, let's do a short term, this thing's going to start edging into the campaign season. And there's nothing good in that for Harry Reid. So not only there's nothing good in that. So it's very simple for him just to show minimal enthusiasm for this deal, and then when you throw in the shutdown on top of it, he walks away. So
yeah, and not to mention the confrontation with the mayor of Washington D.C. yesterday.
Right. Now that was interesting because the mayor they were having his own press conference about wanting the Senate to take up the House.
Right.
Yeah, which passed unanimously, by the way, without one Democrat standing up to object. The Senate won't touch it because they don't want to put their members on the spot about reopening parts of the government. So you've got all kinds of cogs in this thing. Not everybody's in agreement.
We will see where this all leads, Susan. As always, appreciate your time and your insight. This is certainly your busy season, as they call it, and I thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Take care. Susan Ferrechio, ladies and gentlemen, Chief Congressional Correspondent, Washington Examiner. When we come back, the grandson of Billy Graham will be here. He has some very interesting things to say about the church on the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and radio.